This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem.
There's always a lot of white noise out there. It's good to clear it every now and then. Hey there, folks. So, if you watched the live stream that I did last night, you've kind of heard a lot of what I'm going to be saying. In case you didn't, here's the formal video. The rumor mill in regards to Doctor Who went into overdrive yesterday, thanks to an article, a response, and then, of course, the fandom doing what the fandom always does. I'll get into that in a minute. As a general rule, I don't really talk about rumors on here for a couple of reasons. The main one being the vast majority of them are nonsense and crap and garbage. Like, it's pretty common when people ask me in comments or on live streams like, oh, hey, what do you think about this rumor? I will actually most likely never have heard the dang thing. And then when I do, I'm like, what's the supporting evidence for that? Because just sort of my general thing is if it's not confirmed, I don't really have an opinion. Because odds are it's not true anyways. And the other thing is, like, you start down the rumor rabbit hole and, like, that's just going to be, that's just going to take over what you do. Because the rumor mill never stops churning. So I don't generally deal in this kind of stuff. But I have reason to this time. So what's the rumor that we're even talking about? Well, this all got kicked off from a piece by the UK outlet, The Sun. Don't click off yet. I know they're trash. I know they're garbage. I am fully aware. Stick with me. Okay? So, The Sun reported that Ncuti Gatwa either has already or is imminently about to leave the show. And went on to say things like he's looking at getting houses in Los Angeles. The BBC is going to be shelving the show and putting it on hiatus for at least 10 years. Gatwa already filmed a regeneration scene. And this, of course, especially with the claim that the show was going on hiatus again, has led to the main thing that has just sucked all the oxygen out of the room is the idea of, is Doctor Who canceled? Is it ending? Now, of course, there's a certain stripe of pundit on here who has been shouting that Doctor Who is over and canceled for basically the last 10 years. And I'm sure that they are all now trying to claim that they're right when in honesty, they just kept saying the same thing over and over and over and just hope that eventually it'll be true. But I don't want to deal with them. I never do. So that conversation about, is the show dead? You know, however you want to word that. That is a conversation that has just taken up all the oxygen. And the BBC actually responded to that because Radio Times got in touch with the BBC and spoke with someone over there. Unlike The Sun, who took whatever their initial thing was that they found out and then just ran off the end of the damn earth with it. Radio Times actually got in touch with the BBC. And what the BBC said is the show is not being shelved. We are going to announce plans for a third season after the second season airs. Our agreement with Disney was for 26 episodes. We are currently at half of that. So no, there are no plans for us to stop and the show is not shelved. And in regards to anything else, we don't respond to anything that would potentially spoil story stuff, was pretty much what it amounted to. Normally, this would be where I walk away. Like, The Sun claimed something ridiculous. The BBC said, nah. And I would go like, okay, fine. Like if it turned out later that the BBC is lying and it became official, I would deal with it then. Normally, that would be the point where I'd leave the topic. Here's the thing, though. I had heard things on my own. Now, I kind of mentioned already, oftentimes when people ask me about rumors, I haven't even heard them. The reason being, I don't hang out in the places where rumors circulate and honestly are frequently started. I don't hang out in the kinds of forums or subreddits or Twitter threads or whatever where this stuff just gets spun out of literally nowhere and then gets passed along enough that people assume there must be something to it because so many people are saying it. I don't hang out in those spaces. I just don't. But I'd already heard some of this. Not all of it. Most of it's BS. Let's be clear about that. But I had heard things independent of this and sometime before. I forget exactly when. I'm going to say around 3 weeks ago, because I have sometimes, every now and then, rumors do get to me, not because the general rumor mill got to me, but because I got contacted by people who I have reason to believe, at the very least, feel confident about what they are saying to me, even if it is sometimes 1 or 2 steps removed. Now, I haven't brought that up to now. I generally don't go out on a limb with rumor stuff. I've done it twice. It didn't pan out either time. So I generally don't do that. But that doesn't mean that I've stopped getting stuff floated at me from, again, sources that I have some degree of faith in. And while I do not think there is any real accuracy and it was anything other than wild speculation on the part of the Sun, the idea that the show is being shelved, that it's going to go on hiatus for 10 years. Who plans to shelve something for a set amount of time? That's not how any corporation works. Not even the BBC, which is a distinctly different entity from most corporations I talk about. Like, that's not how anything works. Like, all that's nonsense. However, I do think that the starting kernel of Gatwa either already having left or wanting to leave, I do think that's accurate. Because that's something I'd already heard. And again, not from the wild rumor mill, from actual sources that I have faith in, that were communicated, that I didn't catch wind of and ooh, there's the thing. No, people who I spoke with. And no, I'm not going to name them. No, I'm also not going to go into super high detail in what I was told because, again, a lot of the specifics feel a little too close to rumor mill spinning, getting into the nature of how and why and all the rest of this. But the core fact that he either is leaving or wants to, yeah, I think that's true. Again, because I'd already heard it. Now, there is no doubt going to be a million miles of speculation even before it becomes official, if it does, as to why. And again, I have no doubt there's a certain stripe of YouTuber out there who's going to be like, oh, he knows it's crap. He knows it's woke garbage. He knows that. Even disregarding that, there are any number of reasons. And I don't really want to get into speculation about that. The one and only thing that I will say is I suspect that the show probably, and I know logistically this wasn't in the cards, but just broadly speaking, the show should have gotten Gatwa a couple of years earlier because his star has been on a pretty strong rise at the same time that he's trying to do this show. And while the show was a big deal, I think they got him in around the same time as he was starting to outgrow the part. Because Doctor Who usually, not 100% of the time, but usually is going with lesser known actors or character actors or actors who haven't quite had their break yet. That's been true of a very large number of them. You know, Matt Smith was practically unknown when he was cast. Christopher Eccleston was known, but again, he was a character actor. David Tennant had been around a bit, but hadn't really had his breakthrough yet. There have been a couple of exceptions to that. Peter Davison was well known as the lead of All Animals, Great and Small at the time he got cast. And Peter Capaldi was very well known at the time he was cast. But he was also late enough in his career where he didn't really have to worry about maintaining momentum into something greater. Like, I think he was, at the time he was cast, pretty comfortable with his career for what it was. And that's not me trying to project onto what Gatwa is or isn't comfortable with, does or doesn't want. But if I were to guess, and this is the only guess I intend to make, I think the nature of his career momentum is clashing with the nature of being on and involved in this show. That's my suspicion. Now, as to the rest of what the Sun has said, that, like, oh, it's canceled, this, and that, like, I think that is nonsense insofar as I think they just made up pretty much all of it. I do think they had that original nugget, though, because I think the original starting nugget that they probably had was Gatwa is leaving and or wants to leave. And I think they probably got something similar to what I got. But rather than, in my case, sitting on it, which I wouldn't expect them to do, but rather than just reporting that, they made a much bigger thing out of it to the point that the BBC responded. Now, it is worth noting in the BBC's response, they flatly deny the idea that the show is canceled or shelved or that they aren't planning to move forward. It does acknowledge that plans for season 3 will not be solidified until the response to season 2 has been made clear. They are pretty upfront about that. They're a bit cagier dealing with the possibility of Gatwa leaving. Now, I'm not going to say they don't address it at all. They sort of do. It kind of falls under that thing of them saying, like, we don't talk about things that involve story developments. Because if they were to confirm that either Gatwa is staying or is leaving, that would be confirming a story element, especially if they say that he's leaving, because that would confirm that a regeneration is happening. It is still a little bit weird that denial of him leaving is couched in this other blanket thing of like, well, we don't comment on this kind of thing, rather than being addressed openly like the rest of it was. I'm not going to say that is damning, but that does stand out to me. As to the whole thing of like, well, we have to wait until season 2. That might lead some folks to think, oh, well, if season 2 doesn't do especially well, or if Disney isn't happy with it or whatever, then like, well, that'll be it. There won't be more. Not necessarily. I think what we're dealing with here is an issue of knowing how much money they're going to have. So I am going to reiterate my stance that I have no reason to believe that Disney has any actual content or editorial say over Doctor Who. I have seen no actual evidence of that, only a crap ton of speculation and whining from people who didn't like the season 1 episodes or season as a whole for whatever reason. I'm sorry, that whole thing was incredibly Russell T Davies. So if you think somebody was pushing him to do it the way that he did it, no, they weren't. So while I maintain that still now, to say that Disney has no influence would be inaccurate. But I don't mean about story plot lines or developments or elements within any given episode. What I mean is the nature of how the show will be made. Because Disney's money is a factor. Disney put in a fair amount of money into this thing, and they may not be getting what they wanted out of it. This is something else that is difficult to quantify because streaming services do not have to report their numbers. They sometimes will most commonly, if something did really, really well, they'll talk about that because they'll brag about it. If something did particularly poorly, they might bring that up to justify cancellation. But by and large, they don't say what the streaming numbers are. Some analysts who do their best to make heads or tails of this stuff in the absence of the information have come to not the conclusion, but are leaning towards the notion that Doctor Who has not been exceptionally good for Disney, not because the streaming numbers aren't good, but because the people who watch it aren't sticking around. Like the people who sign up new to Disney Plus for Doctor Who, they aren't sticking around to watch other stuff. And from Disney's perspective, that was the hope, to bring in an audience like, okay, they're here for Doctor Who, but now look, Star Wars, Marvel, all this other stuff. But if they're not sticking around for the other stuff, then you just get, 2 months, 3, if they resubscribe to get the holiday special, 3-month subscription out of them, but that's it. That's not what they would have wanted. That's not nothing in terms of return on investment, but that's not what they want. What they want is a new audience to be brought in and to stay. And again, this is not 100% concrete, but analysts have suggested, based off the data that they can get, that the audience who's showing up for Doctor Who that wasn't already on Disney Plus, like I was, aren't sticking around. And that would be a reason for Disney to consider not sticking with it. Now, there's a question of what is allowed by their contracts. As mentioned by the BBC, they were contracted for 26 episodes. It's currently 13. New season's going to be 8, so that'll put them at 21, and we'll still leave 5 episodes to be fulfilled. Will that contract be honored, or is there some kind of escape clause on that? We don't know. But if Disney bails, and I strongly suspect that is the big hitch on this, I suspect that Disney's continued involvement and Disney's money is contingent on what the second season does. So if the second season doesn't do especially well, Disney may well back out. If not immediately, at the very least signal that they are done as soon as the episode obligation is met, which 5 episodes left wouldn't be a full season. In fact, if there's another Christmas special, then that just leaves 4 episodes. That's half a season at the current length. So if Disney leaves, that does not mean the show is dead. That does not mean the show is canceled. That does not mean the show goes on hiatus. But it does mean they would have to rearrange plans and they would have to scale appropriately because they no longer have that money. They could launch into season 2 pretty much immediately because Disney was fully committed to that. The money was already in. They knew what they had. They could write it. They could plan it. They could film it. If season 3 is contingent on season 2 doing well, then it's a bad idea for them to commit to season 3 now or start planning for season 3 now because they don't know how much money they're going to have. And you can't really plan effectively for both having and not having a substantial stack of money. Like the very idea of who would be cast, where it would be filmed, how it would be filmed, how many special effects they can plan for, how much they have to budget control is going to be very directly affected by whether or not Disney bails. And if Disney bails, they got to scale the whole thing down. And to do that correctly, you need to do that from the planning stage. So until you know if they are still on board, it's a bad idea to be making plans because you are either going to be planning on something that is scaled down for no reason because Disney sticks around and like, oh, well, it could have been just as big as other seasons, but you played it safe and now it's just like, oh, we're now overpaying for something that's scaled down. Or the other bad scenario is you count on that money, then they're gone, and now suddenly you have to slash stuff, slash whole episodes, remove entire things, or just lower the overall quality of the thing. And if you kept the ambition of the stories at the same level, suddenly it just looks like garbage because you have way less money to do the same ideas. So that, I think, is where we're at. Now, in terms of the idea that Gatwa might regenerate and has already filmed a regeneration scene, I highly doubt that. Well, actually, so there's one possibility of that I'll put an asterisk on, like that's possible, but I still doubt it. And then there's one thing, no freaking way. That is absolutely not happening insofar as the idea that there is another Doctor who's already been cast and has filmed their regeneration where they become the Doctor. That has definitely not happened. In our current era and age, the idea of whether it is open auditions or not, but the idea of either auditioning or contacting people to come in and read for and discuss the possibility of being in this, and then having actually signed on the dotted line and filmed stuff, the idea of that not having already gotten out in this current environment, yeah, no. There's no chance that we wouldn't know. So that definitely didn't happen. It is possible, I don't think it's true, but it is possible that at the end of Series 2, maybe Gatwa filmed a regeneration scene and his final episode will start the regeneration, but then it'll like hard cut to credits right before the face changes because they haven't cast a new actor yet. That I doubt, but is possible. Now, I suppose the one other thing I'll mention briefly, there was a whole thing on Graham Norton where Gatwa like said, oh yeah, there's a season 3, and he like said some shooting dates. And then that was removed from like streaming and rebroadcasts of that episode. I only know so much about this. I know that it happened, but here's my suspicion as far as that goes. Because like the assumption of many people was that, oh, he spilled the beans of that he wasn't supposed to. He said when they started filming, that's why they cut it. Like possibly, but given what we already know about what the BBC is saying, that they won't make decisions about season 3 until after season 2 airs, it seems unlikely that dates would be locked in. Even if like they are planning for, okay, here's generally when we're going to shoot whatever it is, and we'll plan the size and scale ahead of time, and they've given themselves enough of a buffer, you've still got to like book locations and studio space and everything else. And if you don't know what it is you're doing yet, you're probably not doing that. If I were to guess, I think Gatwa may have said some dates that were like penciled in, like here's the plan, here's the idea, but it's probably not locked down, which would be a reason to cut it because that's unconfirmed. Might there have been another reason? Maybe. That's the one that makes the most sense to me. And that's also something I normally wouldn't talk about, but I know someone's going to bring it up in the comments if I don't. So where does that leave us? Well, regardless of quality, because this entire conversation about like how well season 2 of Doctor Who does has everything to do with viewer numbers and retention of subscribers for Disney especially, and nothing to do with actual raw quality. Will the second season be good? I don't know. We'll see when we get it. But regardless of its actual quality, I would be surprised if it performs notably better in its second season on Disney Plus than it did in its first. That's possible, but I'd be surprised. And so if I were to get a little bit speculative about the future of the show, I think that there is a fair chance that Disney walks after the second season because they aren't getting the streaming numbers or the retention rate that they want. And the Doctor Who plans will have to be scaled down as a result of that. That will probably mean, amongst other things, no more spinoffs after the one that we're already getting. I think around that same time, we will probably find out that Gatwa is leaving. Now, will there be a hiatus of sorts? Quite possibly, especially considering if they can't start planning what season 3 is until they know how season 2 lands, and we still don't actually have the dates for season 2 when that's going to air yet. I'm still expecting it around the same time as last year. But if they can't even start planning, then we're not going to get anything in 2026. That's almost a guarantee. So like a hiatus insofar as they can't already be far enough into pre-production for us to get much stuff next year, aside from maybe a special or two. But that's not unprecedented. There were years when Moffat ran it where we missed full series for a stretch of time, like during the year, where we got just like had to subsist on specials because the man was doing too dang much at the same time. So I think that we will probably be looking at a gap of 1-2 years tops before stuff comes back. It'll be smaller scale, and I expect it would still continue forward. I've talked before about how franchises aren't allowed to die. They're really not. It is a little bit of a different beast with the BBC because it is not a fully just money-hungry monster in terms of the way that it is set up, the way that Disney, Warner Brothers, Sony, etc. are. But they still know that they have something that is beloved, and it would be foolish of them to fully sit on and do nothing with. So I doubt that is really in the cards. It's just a question of how much shifts and changes after season 2. And the shifts and changes I expect are that Gatwa leaves, and that may or may not include a regeneration at the end of season 2. I expect not. I expect that to be pushed to a special. I expect Gatwa leaves, Disney pulls out, and they have to scale down plans. That's what I think we're looking at. And anything beyond that is more speculative than I'm comfortable getting. I've honestly already been a little bit more speculative than I generally try to be. But like I said, I think for all of the nonsense they spun with it, I do think there was an original kernel of truth to the Sun's reporting. I might also be wrong. I'd like to be wrong. I'd like to be wrong across the board, actually. I would very much like to be wrong and that Gatwa is committed to the part for a while yet to come and that Disney isn't going to bail. I would like to be wrong, but if you're here for my opinion, that's what it is. Thank you for sticking with me through this. It's been a weird week. Apparently, also the Gallifrey 1 convention in Los Angeles is going to end after another 3 years. They announced that because the people running it don't want to do it indefinitely, and it's run by people. It's not run by a big corporation or company. So if they want to walk away and end it on their own terms, I respect that. But boy, am I going to miss it. So this coming off the back of that is, it's been a lot. It's been a lot this week. But those are my thoughts on the rumors and what's going around right now. What are your thoughts on any of this? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meeting. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting Patreon supporters: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Andre, Becky Sparks, Claire Wright, Renabulax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam RDL Taylor, Palbo Rabajagal, Mary Mello, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. If you want to see me try and read your name while dealing with these little pains in my butt, check out the rewards on my Patreon and see if there's any that you like.